Well, what voters told Siena this month is that when it comes to the state budget, they're giving the legislature a solid F, and they're giving the governor maybe a C-. 47% of voters said that the legislature deserves an F for its efforts on the budget this year, while another quarter of the voters said they'd only give them a D. As far as the governor is concerned, 27% of voters gave him an F and 24% gave him a D. If your student came home with grades like this, you'd be reluctant to send your student back to school. Well, it'll be interesting to see how the voters feel about sending these legislators back to Albany come November. Well, the governor got a lot of good play, a lot of good editorial coverage for his vetoes, more than 6,000 vetoes of legislative adds to the budget. Voters are not that sure they agree with the governor. By a slim margin, 49 to 37%, voters support the fact that the governor vetoed the member item or pork barrel spending that the legislature added to the budget. But the biggest veto that the governor took was in the area of school aid to education, and there voters strongly opposed by a margin of 58 to 38% the governor's vetoing of that additional school aid money. Well, the State University and City Universities of New York, the two public higher education systems in New York, are looking for greater flexibility on how they manage their campuses, including the ability to control what tuition each of those campuses charge. Right now, the state government sets the tuition rate, and the colleges have very little flexibility in terms of how they operate. When voters were asked whether they support SUNY and CUNY's efforts to have greater flexibility, by a margin of 54 to 37%, voters say yes, they do support it. Support is bigger upstate than it is in New York City, but there is support for this SUNY Flex proposal upstate and downstate among Democrats, Republicans, and independent voters. Well, when it comes to the statewide offices, the Democrats continue to maintain large leads over their Republican opponents. Andrew Cuomo has a better than 30-point lead over Rick Lazio or Carl Palladino. If it becomes a three-way race with Palladino on an independent line and Lazio on the Republican line, Cuomo still wins big. When it comes to the junior senator of New York, Kirsten Gillibrand, she maintains a 20-plus point lead over any of her three potential rivals. And senior senator Chuck Schumer has a commanding lead over either candidate who is seeking the Republican nomination right now. State Controller Tom DiNapoli has a 2-to-1 lead, 48% to 24% over Harry Wilson, his Republican opponent. DiNapoli continues to be unknown to the majority of state voters, but Wilson is unknown to even more. Well, President Obama, who is not doing well in polls nationally, continues to be strong in New York. Right now, 60% of voters have a favorable view of President Obama, compared to 37% of voters who have an unfavorable view. But what we see here in New York that does mirror what we see nationally is that Democrats overwhelmingly have a favorable view of the president, while Republicans overwhelmingly have a negative view of the president. Well, New Yorkers think that the state is very much headed in the wrong direction. It is at a near record high. 71% of voters think that the state is headed in the wrong direction, compared to only 20% of voters who think the state is headed on the right track. And when Siena asked voters how they think the fiscal condition of this state will be 1 year from today, there is more pessimism than there is optimism. 38% of voters think fiscal conditions next year will be even worse than they are right now, compared to 25% who think that the fiscal condition of the state will have improved. Another 34% say it'll be about the same. If you add those two numbers together, 72% of New York voters think that 1 year from today, the fiscal condition of the state will either be the same or worse. Right now, only 25% of New York voters have a favorable view of either the New York State Senate or the New York State Assembly. 61% of voters have an unfavorable view of the Assembly, and an even larger 66% have an unfavorable view of the New York State Senate. And when Siena asked about the leaders of those two legislative bodies, Democratic conference leader in the New York State Senate, John Sampson, is virtually unknown to voters. But Assembly Speaker Sheldon Silver, who has been the Speaker for nearly 16 years, is very well known to voters of this state. 20% have a favorable view of him, and twice as many, 40%, have an unfavorable view of Speaker Silver.